you guys made it to the end. Congratulations. David sort of did my introduction, and I want to tell him that I did my absolute best to meet as many people as possible in the last 2 days, but I didn't get to everyone, and I think part of my introduction, or what I probably would have said to you, is important, so I'm going to say it here now. I am a designer researcher in the Spark Design Lab, which is part of the Center for Innovation at Mayo Clinic, and I have been doing that job for more than 4 years. In that time, I have seen thousands of healthcare interactions, every specialty, every venue you can imagine. I have had the privilege of access, and the enormously generous people who seek care at the Mayo Clinic and the people who work here have allowed me to be present at some of the most ordinary, some of the most life-changing moments of their lives. I've been there for flu shots, I've been there for annual exams. I was there when a patient and her husband first received the diagnosis that she had Lou Gehrig's disease. I was there, and I did not plan this, so Carl should know that, but I was there when a patient responded with what can only be described as delight and pride at seeing a 4D image of his own body. I was there when a patient had their 4th visit in as many days with their primary care physician because they were struggling to come to terms with the diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. I was in the hospital the day that a physician took the hazardous waste bin and pulled it over next to the bed so that he could sit down and talk to a patient at eye level about unexpected complications that had happened. And I was there right next to the palliative care team as they talked to a daughter who was struggling to come to terms with her mother's impending death. And from all of this, I feel qualified to stand here in front of you today and tell you what good healthcare delivery looks like. It looks like a satisfying conversation, which is to say it looks like people relating to each other through the exchange of thoughts and ideas towards achieving a goal. And it looks like the most human thing you've ever seen in your life. Now, the idea that conversation and communication are related to healthcare is not a new one. I can certainly say at Spark, we start every single project thinking about conversation. What's it like now? What should it be like in the future? But the nature of healthcare delivery is that it takes a lot of people working in concert to achieve some of these big, bold ideas. And in my experience, at some point in that development process towards the big idea, our ability to argue that satisfying conversations are important diminishes. At some point, satisfying conversations begin to get pushed to the side, dismissed as soft. They're nice to have, they're an extra. At some point, I stand in front of a group of people to pitch an idea, and I hear some version of this sentence. That part's really great, but what are you going to do to guarantee that doctors can see more patients? And what I want to try and do in my time here today as the last speaker at the symposium is attempt to convince you that satisfying conversations are not a nice to have. They're not an extra. They are the very essence of healthcare delivery. And without them, you don't have anything. So how is a designer researcher going to convince you? The absolute only way I know how. Insights and stories from the last 4 years. Exceedingly brief stories, but stories nonetheless. These are the things that I saw that convinced me. So, insight number 1. Conversation is how, do you like that little pirouette? Sorry. Conversation is how people determine quality and value. The number 1 reason that people give for returning to the Mayo Clinic or recommending Mayo Clinic to their friends and family is that the doctors there take the time to talk with them and answer all their questions, which is really interesting. Because that big campus, a couple of blocks from here, is a world-class academic medical institution with a reputation for being the place of last resort, the place you go when no one else has been able to help you. And the story that people tell is not Mayo Clinic saved my life, it's not Mayo Clinic had the medication, the procedure, the technology, the robot that nobody else had. It's that when I come to Mayo Clinic, they take the time to talk to me and answer all my questions. Number 2, conversation has therapeutic value. So I've heard a lot of discussions about this over the last couple of days of the struggle about wellness. What do we mean when we talk about wellness? What do patients mean when they talk about wellness? We've been having that struggle too. Wellness is one of our platforms within the Center for Innovation, and a few months ago, we decided to kind of get out of our heads a little bit and go talk to some patients. And so one of my colleagues created a worksheet that had all these different dimensions of wellness on it: emotional health, physical health, spirituality, friends, family, work life, home life, food. If any of you came on Sunday night to the Spark Lab, you probably saw them up against the whiteboards. We took those worksheets and our team went down to the patient cafeteria, and over the course of a couple of days, we asked about 20 or so patients if we could talk to them. And we all came back upstairs and we got amazingly rich information. It just surfaced all of the complexity that we'd been talking about up in our offices. But that's actually not the reason I'm telling you this story. The reason I'm telling you this story is as we came back together, the very first thing that one of my colleagues said was, "Did anybody else feel like we helped those people while we were just talking to them?" Just the act of sitting down with them, asking questions, helping them draw some connections in their own lives, increasing their own understanding, it just felt like it was helpful. And every single one of us agreed. And this was the result of a research exercise with a bunch of designers. So, number 3, conversation allows us to deal with ambiguity. So, you might not know it to look at me now, because now I claim junior medical degrees in any number of specialties. But when I started here, I didn't know anything about medicine. I stopped taking science when I was in high school. And the very first project I had to work on was one to help design a diabetes medication decision aid to help patients with type 2 diabetes figure out what medication they wanted to be on. And my partner in that effort was Dr. Victor Montori, who you all heard from yesterday. And so we had to start out with Victor kind of giving me Diabetes 101, so I at least knew what we were talking about. And he was explaining to me diabetes and explaining to me the medications, and we were talking about metformin at one point. And I said, yeah, Victor, yeah, but what does the medication do? And he said, what do you mean? I said, do you take it, and then does it tell your pancreas to secrete more insulin or something? And he said, oh, we don't know. I said, you don't know? He said, we don't know how things work. We just know that they work. And my mouth fell to the floor. And I looked at Victor and I said, oh my God, you people don't know as much as we think you do. And it's absolutely true. I walked around in a daze for weeks. It's absolutely true. Ambiguity is at the absolute heart of medicine. And as much as we want to imagine a future in the near term where we're going to be able to offer black and white choices, take this pill, you'll be cured, it's unlikely to happen anytime soon. And the reality is, as Dr. Cortez mentioned, that we are kind of in the business of translating this research information that comes from bench research, which I can tell you is a lot of numbers, uses a lot of phrases like this: p-values, standard deviations, composite outcomes. And then when you get somebody to translate it for you, a lot of times the result is maybe, I don't know, we're not exactly sure what it's telling us. And the reality is, if part of our job is to translate that information into something that patients can understand and begin to use, we're going to have to get really good at talking to each other. Number 4. People seek out conversation even when we make it hard for them. I think this is my absolute favorite insight. A few years ago, my team and I, my colleagues, we worked on a project in the hospital looking at how to design patient-centered hospital experiences. And so for a month, our team of researchers kind of fanned out across the hospital, and we had one research question: look for the absence or the presence of human connection. And for the purposes of this talk, you should know that the presence of human connection generally was good conversations, and the absence of human connection was by and large poor conversations or sometimes missed opportunities for conversations. So our team came back together, we shared all of these stories, and we began to parse the data, and this really interesting pattern emerged. The presence of human connection was by and large the result of individual action, people choosing to do something. And the absence of human connection was by and large the result of the system, of the rules of the hospital. And our group kind of had an epiphany. When we look at it through this lens, you begin to realize that every day we are making choices about our healthcare delivery system. Some of those choices are big, like how do we do informed consent, and some of those choices are really small or seemingly inconsequential, like where do we put chairs. And the reality is that we are making a lot of those decisions in the name of efficiency, of standardization, of legal requirements, of documentation, and the result is every day with each of those decisions, we are building a wall. A wall that is making it harder and harder for people to connect in healthcare. And the good news is, all the people in the healthcare system, the doctors, the nurses, the clinical assistants, and all the people on the patient side, the patients, their friends, and their family, are still making this Herculean effort to leap over that wall and to find ways to connect with each other. But you have to wonder, as Craig Barrett pointed out, nobody likes going to the hospital. Nobody thinks of the hospital as a really good experience right now. What are they going to think of it if we stop having any meaningful connections there at all? So that's it. 4 insights that I've learned in the last 4 years. Every single one of those insights has been said before by other people more thoughtfully, more eloquently than I. Every single one of those insights is supported by evidence, including some randomized controlled trial, peer-reviewed journal, scientific things doctors like evidence to show that it's true. And I believe that if any one of you did my job, even for a short period of time, you would walk away with many of those same insights. Which tells me that what we're doing to the healthcare system is not a problem of knowledge. It's a problem of faith. At some point, we've lost faith in the power of conversations. We've lost faith in the idea that getting people to talk to each other is the most important part of what we do. So maybe we need a reason to believe, maybe we need a call to action. Here's mine. I believe that if we make satisfying conversations and human connection the focus of our healthcare delivery development, if we make connecting people and having them talk to each other the single most important metric by which we judge all of our efforts, we will get everything else we want our healthcare system to be. Rich conversation is the pathway to quality, to efficiency, to affordability. When we have good conversations, doctors don't feel like they have to practice defensive medicine as much. When we have good conversations, we have patients able to make decisions fully understanding the likely outcomes. When we have good conversations, we turn teams of people into a quality safety net that's much more powerful than any single standardized process. And when we have good conversations, we are practicing individualized medicine in its most authentic, its most human form. So this is what I would like to ask all of you to do. If you are even in the most tangential way involved with making and creation around healthcare delivery, if you are a designer, a developer, a researcher, an operations manager, a project manager, a blogger, a tweeter, a writer, ask yourself this question as you're doing your work. What kind of conversation is going to result from this concept? And if you're in leadership, if you're one of those people who listens to ideas, if you decide what goes forward, if you decide what gets funded, ask that question. And if the answer is a better one, have that mean something. And of course, the whole symposium has been about we have to keep talking to each other. Transformation happens through conversation. Health happens through conversation. Thank you.